Okay, so by now we've gotten through the first few steps of Kant's argument. We are into how he defines duty, right? We've said, well, what's good? The goodwill. Well, what's the goodwill? Goodwill is one that does its duty. That is, it follows certain moral rules. Well, now we still have to have the third question, and this is going to be one that we'll spend more time on. How in the world does Kant define duty? Or to put it another way, how do we know what the moral rules are? Now remember, I've talked about this with divine command theory and natural law theory. There are going to be two questions that are important for rules-based theories. And those will be, well, what are the rules? Or another way to put, question one, how do we know what the rules are? Question two, what makes these rules so important? Why is it that we should follow them? And Kant, will say that we should follow these rules no matter what. Why does he say that? Why do the rules have that level of importance? So, Kant gives us the formula of universal law, the formula of humanity, to try to figure out what the moral rules are. With both of these, I want to ask, how well does it do with answering these two questions? Let's start. Keep these in the back of your mind, but let's talk through in this lecture the formula of universal law and see how this formula of universal law is supposed to work, what it is and how it is supposed to work. So Kant's formula of universal law has two steps. The first step is ask yourself what the principle, so the first step is when you're thinking of doing something, think about the principle or general policy, or as Kant puts it, maxim behind your action. When you do something, you have a reason, and if you think about it, you can think of a general policy behind that reason, right? Why did you take this class? To get your college degree. Why do you want a college degree? Well, you might say, I want to take actions that will improve myself and improve my job prospects, right? General principle, general reasons behind your action. Kant will say, when you're thinking of doing something, ask yourself, what is my principle? What is my maxim? What is the general reason behind the action I'm considering? Second step, could I will that everyone in similar cases always follow this general principle or maxim? If the answer is no, then if you do it, it's against duty. If you answer no to this second question, you know that there's a duty not to do this kind of thing. So running proposed things you're thinking of through this test, that will tell you what your duties are. Now look, I know that that's really abstract, so let's see how this is supposed to work. Let's think of some of the examples Kant actually talks about. So the first of these is the lying promise. The idea is here, well, you're in financial difficulty, you're in trouble, and you have a friend who's very nice, who's very gullible. Let's say you need $500. He would loan you that money, no questions asked. He also wouldn't take a lot of effort to try to get the money back from you. So you know that you could go to this guy and you could lie to him and you could say, loan me $500, I'll pay you back in a month, and if you never paid him back, you might have to delete his number, block his number in your cell phone, but he's not going to do anything to make you pay him back, right? Well, Kant would say in this case, just as an idea how the formula universal law works, think about the general principle or policy behind your action. Kant would say the general policy here is something like, whenever I need money and can get it by making a lying promise to a friend, I will do so. Something like that, right? When I need money and get it by lying, I'll lie. Second step here, could I will that everyone follow that general principle? Kant will say no. And in fact, I couldn't will it because the very fact that I might be able to successfully lie to get money depends on the fact that not everyone does this. If everyone always lied to get money whenever they were in financial difficulty, well, what would happen? Nobody would ever loan anyone money. Either no one would ever loan anyone money, or even really trusting, really nice people like my imagined friend here, even people like that would make darn sure you have to pay them back. The only reason you might be able to lie to someone to get money is that people don't usually do that. So that shows, Kant would say, you have a duty not to lie to get money. I mean, we already knew that, of course, but this is just supposed to show how the principle works. Or let me give you another one that works in the same way. What about shoplifting, right? Hopefully you guys don't do this, but imagine you were thinking of shoplifting. You're in a store, you see something, it's nice, you don't want to pay for it, and you think, well, could I do this? Is there a duty against shoplifting? Well, ask yourself, could you universalize the maxim, the principle of whenever I want something from the store and don't want to pay for it, I'll steal it? Kant would say, no, you can't, and you can't universalize that maxim for the same reason you can't universalize the lying promise one. If everyone in similar circumstances tried to follow your maxim, well, no one would be able to successfully act on it, right? In a world where everybody always tries to do this, what do you think the stores will look like? Right. The Old Navy, or whatever, the Sears, whatever store you're walking out of, it would look, if they still had stores, every store leaving it would basically look like what getting on a plane looks like now, right? They'd have a metal detector, they'd x-ray your bags, they'd run the wand over you, they'd pat you down. In a world where everybody always tries to steal, everybody always tries to shoplift, no one could successfully do it. The very fact that you could maybe successfully shoplift depends on the fact most people don't do that. So hopefully you guys see how this works. How it is that, you can't universalize it because you can't imagine everyone successfully doing it. The fact you might be able to successfully do it depends on the fact people don't usually do that. But there's another way that something can fail this formula of universal law. Let's take another example. Let's imagine that you see someone drowning in shallow water. Don't ask how they got there, but through no fault of their own, they're drowning in shallow water. And you, with mild inconvenience, could save them. You're going to get your nice pants wet, right? Well, do you have a duty to save this person? Well, Kant would say you do, right? Think of the maxim of the action for not helping this person. What would be the general principle? Something like, I will never help another human being, or maybe I will never help another human being unless there's something in it for me, something to my advantage, right? Well, look, what could you will? Would you wish that everyone always follow that principle? Kant would say no, you couldn't, right? You can imagine everyone successfully acting on the principle, I'll never help anybody else out, or I'll never help people out when it's not to my advantage. You couldn't universalize that, though, because, well, why? Think about it for a second. Why couldn't you universalize that? Well, because you might need help, right? Given the kinds of creatures human beings are, given what we, the facts we know about human beings, there's a very good chance you're going to need help someday. And if you do, you would want other people to help you out. If you're the person in trouble, you'd want someone to help you, so you couldn't will this principle, no one ever helps anybody else out. So Kant would say that shows that you have a duty to help others. You have some duty to assist other human beings. It is wrong not to help others in some cases. Or let me give you guys one more example here. This is also one of Kant's examples. Imagine that you, or maybe not you, let's just imagine somebody who is really talented. He could, he's smart, he can make all these great contributions to the world, but he's really lazy. He's really lazy, and what's more, let's imagine that he has inherited a trust fund, right? His rich uncle has left him all this money, and he doesn't even have to keep his finances. Someone else keeps it for him. He just gets a check every month for, like, let's say $4,000 or $5,000, right? He just gets his check. He doesn't have to do anything. Now, this person can be as lazy as he wants to be. Even though he could make a contribution, he could be a productive member of society, given his circumstances, he could just sit there on his rear end doing nothing or playing video games all day, right? Well, let's imagine that he asks himself, well, do I have a duty to try to make a contribution to society, to do something, to develop my abilities, even though I don't want to? Well, Kant would say, well, imagine what his principle is, his maxim. His maxim, if he's that lazy, is probably like something like, I will do the bare minimum I need to do to survive. Could he will that everyone in the world be as lazy as he is? No, he couldn't, right? He wants to sit around, let's imagine, playing video games and drinking beer. Could he will that everyone in the world be as lazy as he is? Well, no. If everyone were that lazy, well, for one thing, he wouldn't have his beer. No one would be brewing beer, probably. He wouldn't have video games. But, think of it. The very fact he has a trust fund depends on the fact his uncle wasn't as lazy as he was, right? In a world where everyone was as lazy as he was, he couldn't live the life he wants, right? So he couldn't will, even though you could imagine everyone being that lazy. We wouldn't starve. Society would function, if barely. Even though you can imagine everyone doing the bare minimum they need to do to get by, you could not will that as a universal law. Even our very lazy person could not, because he wouldn't want everyone to be as lazy as he's thinking of being. So we have, Kant would say, some duty to contribute to society, to develop the talents we have. Now look, one point I want to emphasize here, and I'm going to bang the table on this, I'm going to emphasize this a few times. When thinking about the formula of universal law, remember, for Kant, it's not the consequences, it's the principle. Now look, I can, if I'm lazy, that doesn't necessarily mean that tomorrow everybody else is going to go out and be lazy, right? Our person in my example, it would be wrong for him to be that lazy even if no one else followed his example and was lazy, even if everybody else kept being hardworking. Why? It's wrong not because of the consequences, it's wrong because he can't will it as a universal law. Not the case that if he doesn't do it, if he doesn't work, everybody else is going to become as lazy. No one else might follow his examples. That's not the problem. The problem is, no matter what anybody else might do, he couldn't will it as a universal law. Remember, for Kant, it's whether you do your duty, it's not what the consequences of your actions might be. In the same way, it's wrong to lie to my friend even if no one else ever lies to a friend ever. It's wrong because I couldn't will that everyone follow this principle. And what's more, even if it turns out that I'm a really bad liar and I don't fool my friend, even if he sees right through me, what I've done is wrong because I couldn't will it as a universal law. I have a bad intention. Remember, for Kant, it's whether you do your duty or not, it's not the consequences. Okay, so what I want to finish up, though, is just assessing the formula universal law. Does it do the work Kant wants it to do? Does it do the work that Kant needs it to do? Remember, think back to those two principles that are important for assessing a rules-based theory. Can it tell us what the rules are? Does it tell us why the rules are important? Now, so far, I think there's good reason to think that the formula of universal law does a pretty good job with question 1. It does a pretty good job telling us what the rules are. We'll talk about this. There might be some questions there. Might be some reasons to push back. But for the most part, I think it does pretty well with that. Does it do a good job telling us why the rules are important? On that one, I am not so sure. Think about this, right? For Kant, it's whether you follow the rule or not, it's not the consequences. Let me tell you guys a story. Now, when I was a kid, we went on this field trip to a local apple orchard. And, of course, one of the kids, when they weren't paying attention, I think we got apples at the end, but whatever, kids are impatient, they're impulsive, right? So he just snags an apple off a tree and he starts eating it. Really terrible idea, I'm sure, because I'm sure there's all kinds of pesticides and nasty stuff on the apple, right? Well, but our teacher sees this, and that's not what she objects to. She objects to him, stealing this apple. And in explaining to him why this was wrong, she reaches for good Kantian reasons, right? She says, well, look, would you want everyone to steal apples like you're doing? And of course, he's supposed to think to himself, well, no, right? And she explains, well, if everybody tried to do that, there wouldn't be any apples on any of these trees. There wouldn't be any apples for you. If everybody tried to do that, they wouldn't let our tours come through. Maybe there wouldn't even be apples at all, because who'd want to keep an orchard if everyone stole apples? And she lectures him, and he looks appropriately embarrassed and ashamed. Now look, I don't know what he was thinking, But I know what I was thinking. What I was thinking was, well, yeah, who cares, right? I wouldn't want everybody to do it. That would be bad if everyone did do it. If it awful consequences, everyone steals apples. Yeah, that's bad. But why should I care that not everyone can do it? If I steal one apple, the sky will not fall. Yes, of course, I wouldn't want everyone to steal an apple, but that's not the issue here. The issue is why shouldn't I steal an apple? Yeah, I wouldn't want everybody to do it, but why does that mean I can't do it? Why shouldn't I take an apple? Now, I didn't say this because when I was in elementary school, they could still paddle us. Probably says a lot about where I went to elementary school and also how old I am. But look, I kept my mouth shut, but that was what I was thinking. Who cares that not everybody can do it? You know, whatever this kid's name is, I can't remember. Why should he care that not everyone could steal an apple? Why should I care that not everyone can steal it? Why should that make any difference to whether I do it, right? Kant's formula of universal law is not, on its own at least, not so good at answering that second question. Why are the moral rules so important? Why should we care? Now look, this doesn't mean that Kant doesn't have an answer. I think Kant does have an answer. But seeing what that is will require that we actually look at this formula of humanity. So that's what we'll do in the next lecture. Let's look at this formula of humanity, see what it is, and how it might give Kant a better answer to the question, to the challenge.